what barriers to financial inclusion persist, and what role do you want to see regulators play, especially in regards to fintech and new technologies that can overcome some of these issues?
Yeah, thanks. One consistent barrier I had touched on just in my last comment, and that is financial regulatory policy oversight mechanisms need modernization, and they need to catch up to the modern operational and access practices that modern fintech companies are employing, because they are cross-border, they are consumer-driven, and they are increasingly peer-to-peer. That is not how financial regulatory oversight has been constructed in legacy architected banking systems, right? That are jurisdictionally bound, have intermediaries, not peer-to-peer, and they stress the issue of compliance versus risk. Compliance versus risk. And so the regulatory reform needs to reflect that modernization. Secondly, from a financial technology perspective, there are attributes of new technologies that provide access and secure transfers of value, which are no longer cash and coin, right? It's data. It's the transfer of data, personal and financial, across internet and online channels for value or to hold that value. So today, any individual or organization could theoretically have an account, a stored value in a bank account or a wallet, hosted anywhere in the world. That is a reality today. If that is the case today, we need an oversight mechanism that is not architected and designed for legacy banks. We need an oversight mechanism that is architected, designed, and dynamic enough to recognize two things: the reality of those operational infrastructure changes, and number two, how they are proactively designed for inclusion. And that's the number three point of financial services regulatory and a barrier here, is that I think we talked a little bit about before. Financial regulatory supervision and oversight is exclusionary in nature. How do I look at Lourdes and box her risk? How do I look at Louisa and box her risk? Transaction sizes, frequencies, amounts, access, things like that. We have to reverse the flow and start including more in the economy. And therefore, the final piece of the design element on modernization is that the test for effectiveness of a secure, compliance-centric financial ecosystem should be tested on inclusion as a part of the effectiveness, not simply do you tick the boxes on all the associated legal, regulatory, law enforcement mechanisms for financial compliance. It should actually be tested for how many more are you getting securely in the system, and therefore transparently engaging more segments of our economy that we didn't. And like I said before, by doing so, inclusion will therefore drive increased transparency and bring down overall systemic risk, which is the entirety of financial services regulation, right? Bring down that systemic risk, increase that resilience and security. And so we have to benchmark and look at successes of financial regulatory policy in that frame versus how we have looked at it from an enforcement-centric view to date. And I have been part of that problem, having worked in the US government, with global regulators, with banking institutions. I've been challenged with that problem. So we're working on creating systems for self-incentivized governance with a consortia-led, meaning private sector-led set of standards that say, you know what, if I'm going to be issuing value, storing value, transferring value, I'm going to want to comply with certain risk and compliance controls. And if I can do so and get more organizations complying with that kind of global standard approach, then you don't have the jurisdiction handcuffs that you do today that are in legacy systems.